Hey there, and welcome back to Blue Grit Radio. This is Eric, your host. I just want to start off by saying thank you to all those that have tuned in, subscribed, downloaded, and shared this out. It's definitely been a very exciting project to try something new and to reach people on a new format. So thank you. In this episode, I'm going to go a little bit back toward what Blue Grit Wellness started as, which was a focus on living a better, healthier lifestyle. A lot of that is focused towards first responders because it can be a bit more nuanced, but the carryover is certainly there for all people. Everyone has stress in their lifestyle. Everyone has a myriad of things and factors that make it harder to do what they aim to do. And so, again, this is really just, it's my experience, it's my mistakes, it's my learnings that I'm putting out in hopes that it helps someone else. With that, this episode is going to be a turn away from what several of the prior ones were. Talks of policing, talks of police culture and morale. Certainly that is a huge focal point in my day-to-day. It's a huge focus in my prerogatives. Being in recruiting and hiring, also trying to invest and build up the next generation of policing. And one of my new hats and assignments is the training sergeant. So very much continuation of that in trying to instill and elevate our culture. When I started Blue Grit Wellness, a lot of the content was truly intended to be a bit more focused on health and wellness, fitness and nutrition. So what better topic to start with than nutrition? We are halfway through, or maybe I don't know how you want to say it, but we're in full swing of the holidays. So we had Halloween, we had Thanksgiving, great times, great eating. Eating and communing with my friends and family are a huge part of my life. So it's not about being super rigid and super restrictive, but I have been in the past, and I have learned a lot of lessons. I have looked for a lot of content and trying to find the best strategies or the best diet or the best whatever, fill in the blank. And that evolved through time. At first it was all information about trying to get bigger and build muscle. And then it became a bit more functional, not truly, but a lot more towards strength. And then it became a bit more in the vanity side of things, where it became about getting lean and trying to just slash fat or whatever you want to call it. So calorie counting, macro counting. I'm not trying to disparage any of those things, but my main takeaway through years of experimentation and research and reaching out to other people and connecting with other people was really that there is no secret sauce. You will hear good trainers and good nutritionists and good dietitians talk about just that. There is no magical pill. There is no magical strategy. It is so individualistic. It is so lifestyle dependent. Environment, stress, activity level, genetics are a part of it. They're not an excuse. They're just a factor. Just like everything that we get dealt in life, it's a factor. You ought to consider it, not fixate on it. So we're going to talk about a handful of different strategies, and I feel like it's worthwhile to try these on. Don't go too hard in the paint. Look at the long term. Think about how these strategies could be a temporary goal. They could be a temporary strategy. I like calling them strategies because they're not going to be the end-all be-all. One thing might work great for this point in your life. It might work absolutely terribly. You might combine a couple of these strategies along with certain exercise protocols that might work amazingly, and keep up with it as long as it works amazingly. But once it starts to come off the rails, then really try to do a self-assessment, consult medical professionals in your life, your doctor. If you have a trainer, work with your trainer, nutritionist, all that. This is probably a good time to insert the disclaimer that this is not medical advice. I am not claiming to be a medical professional or anything of the sort. So please proceed with your own wherewithal. So strategies. One is to track your calories. This can be and has been a contentious point in the nutrition field. However, it's not to be ignored. But what do I mean by that? There are some people that think that tracking your calories is the end-all be-all. There's nothing other than calories in, calories out. This could be true if you consider what a calorie is. Lane Norton has done a lot of good discussion on this, and I know that he's a polarizing figure in fitness and nutrition. However, it's worth saying that he may have started at one point where he did lean a little bit more towards it's just calories. However, what I appreciate about him and some other professionals are that they are willing and they are able to adjust their perspective based on new information. And that's really what we should all do, correct? So calories in, calories out would be true in a vacuum. It would be true if you're considering what a calorie is, which is just a unit of measurement. It's a unit of energy. However, with all of our different bodies, our different metabolisms, our different reactions to different kinds of foods or the chemicals in foods or the compounds in foods, yes, you will burn differently. I'm not a PhD, I'm not an MD, but there's enough content out there. If you search around for it, you can find people that will validate that. And if nothing else, try it on yourself, right? Figure out what your maintenance calories are, and there's a lot of resources on that, a lot of free content, YouTube, articles online that'll tell you how to figure out your maintenance calories. With that, you'll have to track them. So look for an app like MyFitnessPal. Chronometer is another one I've heard of. There's a lot of free ones and some paid ones, but if you're serious about trying the calorie route, a very meaningful way to do that is to be strict off the get-go and truly, be true to it. I don't know many people that compete in bodybuilding or physique, whether personally or through social, that don't adamantly track, weigh, etc. their food to keep it super specific, to keep it accurate and objective. So if you want to try that, don't try for a couple days or a couple meals on and off. That's not going to get you anywhere. I have taken some time to track years and years ago, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what was in my food, like literally the calories in them. I learned a lot about what it felt like to potentially under or overeat, and satiety, so whether foods were going to keep me full. There's no correlation to the calories that they have, which is sad and frustrating and counterproductive. So what I mean is that you could eat a super high calorie meal and feel hungry right away. And so that's satiety. Satiety is how long it's actually satiating you, how long it's keeping you full. You can learn a lot by tracking and seeing that, lo and behold, when you eat more whole foods, as little processing as possible, whether it's plants, fruits, vegetables, whether it's meat, chicken thigh, a rib, a drumstick, half a pound of ground beef, whatever that is, if it's whole food, minimally processed, it is going to keep you satiated. It'll keep you full a lot longer. You won't get quite the cravings as eating processed food. However, all things considered, you will notice a lot of progress if you do track your calories over time, find your maintenance, and then slowly toggle that down. You can absolutely get quicker progress if you toggle them down faster or slash your calories. However, that's going to be a short-term gain. You're going to plateau, you're going to bonk, which is basically a way of saying that you're going to lose a lot of energy, and that'll be troublesome for your performance in the gym. That'll be troublesome for your mental output at work or home. It'll certainly, over a longer time, influence your hormones, your stress levels, which can signal your body to store more fat, even if you're eating in a low caloric point or at a high caloric deficit. So that is definitely something you want to consider. Again, there are a lot of great sources on this, but the main thing I want to say about calories is if you're gonna track them, be super consistent, give it a few weeks, and go nice and slow. Slow and steady wins the race. All right, the next tip is going to be consider using an eating window. So fasting has gotten quite popular lately. It's been in the health spheres as of late, and when I say late, the last few years, it definitely feels like it's gotten a lot hotter recently. Anytime someone can monetize it or put a brand on it, which is usually associated with some program or some supplements, then it gets to be a lot more noticeable and mainstream. But really, fasting and a lot of these tips are free. So consider these sources, the doctors, the nutritionists, dietitians, influencers that are just giving that raw information, and maybe they don't have a product. And it might align very closely with a very notable, a very popular or advertised or celebrity personality that might be saying a lot of the same information, but they might add their little asterisk of, well, this is the product to get you there. So be wary of that. The fitness industry, nutrition has always preyed upon our insecurities, but a lot of the information is there, just without the product placement, without the monetization. So, little side note. But fasting or using different eating windows has been around for probably the beginning of time. I mean, a lot of arguments are about that, right? When we were in Paleolithic times, foreseeably, we didn't have a ample available food supply. We had to go hunt and scavenge for our food. And so with that, your metabolism became a lot more adaptive to what was around. Whereas today, the average American or the average first world nation dweller will just access food and abundance of it whenever they feel like. And I'm certainly one of those people. Like, I can think I'm hungry and then grab a bar or heat up some food or go to the store and get whatever I want, or a restaurant, right? We can all access that whenever we want and truly not be hungry. A lot of times we're just bored or thirsty. So by establishing an eating window and experimenting with that, you can teach your body a lot, right? So with calories, tracking calories, you can teach your body that you have consumed an ample amount of actual food and fuel and energy units to sustain someone of your age, weight, activity level, right? So, I'm in my mid 30s. I'm a guy who's pretty active. A lot of people could survive just great, somewhere between 23 and 3,000 calories, depending on how much muscle mass you had and how much heavy exercise you're doing, that kind of thing, right? But by tracking your calories, I can learn that my 4,000 calories a day, for half the week is superfluous and definitely not necessary and contributing to my weight gain, right? Because your body only needs what it needs and it's going to store the rest as fat. So with using an eating window, I can take that same methodology and I can shrink down the amount of time I'm actively eating. And it doesn't have to be crazy, right? You hear, or if you looked into it, you may have heard different types of fasting. There's different splits, so different hour splits of the day, like 16-8, which would mean you fast for 16 hours and you eat for 8 hours, or 20/4, right? So you only eat 4 hours of the day, or 12-12, which is, pretty mild, but it could be a good strategy. There's the warrior diet where you basically graze maybe a little bit, hardly at all, but then you have, a huge meal after a workout. Or there's actually something called OMAD, which is an acronym for 1 meal a day. So you're literally eating 1 meal a day. There's also alternate day fasting, where you eat for 1 day, like normal, and then you take a whole day off. So from the time you get out of bed to the time you go to bed, you don't eat a single thing. And then you get up the next day and you eat your normal breakfast and your normal lunch and your normal dinner, and you skip the following day. There's also 5-2, where you eat 5 days of the week and you fast for 2 days of the week. And you can see this is on, And I wouldn't be surprised if there's like another dozen two of some random or different little variations of that someone's going to write a book about and promote. But really, there's no magical thing. It is largely due to preference. There might just be people that can fast one way or the other a lot better. Maybe some people do great fasting for 2 days a week where they don't really do much. They kind of, maybe their days off, they kind of sit around and relax. There might be other people that really do well with a strong, 16-hour fast every day, and they eat for 8 hours a day. And if that sounds completely crazy to you, let's just put down an example of the 16-8. So let's just say I skip breakfast because that's easy for a lot of people to do, just maybe by lifestyle, and you decide to eat at 11 a.m. So you go for a slightly early lunch. Well, 8 hours later would be 7 p.m., right? So that just means you finish your dinner by 7 p.m. And you don't eat after that, right? So you don't do any TV snacking, binge watching, and popping popcorn and your candy and all that, or ice cream, that nightly bowl of ice cream, or that glass of wine. You just don't do that. So then you hear it in those terms, and 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. of an eating window is absolutely nothing crazy. It is something you could try, but it's just a strategy. So some people can do this, and it just does what I told you, where it cuts out all the evening mindless eating because you just stuck to one strategy and you're cutting down your overall calories, right? So now you're hearing that these things are related. Largely it is by cutting down your eating window, you're just going to consume fewer calories. You're going to eat less because you're not allowing yourself to eat quite as much. One thing to consider is that when you do these strategies, or when some people do these strategies and they go pretty extreme and they have stressors in their life, such as work stress, that email inbox, boss breathing down your neck, or they're doing 2-a-days, when they do allow themselves to eat within their eating window or their eating prescription, whatever you want to call it, they do go harder to compensate. And I've certainly felt that too. I went through a stint where I was doing a lot of intermittent fasting. I was also pretty low carb, and those are both stressors on your body. And then when you do allow yourself to eat, I would frequently overeat, right? It'd be like a gut bomb, and your stomach's not really ready for it. Your digestion isn't all primed up. And so for some people that may work great, but what I'm saying is that in experimentation with it, I found that it was not for me to do on an extreme level, and thus it's definitely not going to be appropriate for a lot of people, a lot of first responders that do have higher stress throughout their lives. They do have higher stress on their bodies due to shift work, due to working nights, due to the actual danger that you might be encountering, due to that hypervigilance, due to the workouts that hopefully you're doing, which hopefully are moderate to higher intensity to prepare you for the work that you're doing, right? So if you're a firefighter, hopefully you're not just doing, a moderate jog. Hopefully you are picking up something heavy now and then. And hopefully you are doing some circuit training to help with your recovery, quick bursts of activity to really, really boost your cardio. So all the things considered, is generally not the best for physical performance. But again, it is a strategy you can try. It is something that you can use to hack and learn about your body, learn about your habits. I did get to a point where I was fasting, usually for 16 hours as my goal. And then because I was already at work and in the mix, and maybe I'd get a canine track, I would go 18, 20 hours, a couple times a week. And truly, after a little bit, you do get used to it and you feel fine. When the hunger kicks in, after about 10 minutes, you have some water. After about 10 minutes, it usually fades down, which is probably a pretty good indicator that you're not truly hungry a lot of times. Also, when you feel that low blood sugar feeling, that goes away as your body acclimates. It doesn't kick on very frequently, especially when you combine it with a lower carb diet or even a ketogenic style diet. So that's another thing to consider. Again, just like the calorie counting, I would say if it's something you want to experiment with, then go nice and slow. There's absolutely nothing wrong with trying a 12-hour fasting window, right? So allow yourself to eat from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That can cut out a lot of junk. You feel good with that? Let's bump it up to 13 hours. Let's sit there for a couple days before we go to 14, 15, 16, etc. See how it works with you. You may consider the time of day that you fast versus when you work out, when you're most active, or when you're most stressed. Some main pieces of feedback that I've heard and observed for myself are that a lot of people find it easier to fast as they start their day and eat later in the day. However, that might not be optimal for energy levels. That might not be optimal for digesting your food. Most sources, and I guess holistic sources and ancestral or deep-rooted, old-school cultural health practices, when you look at Eastern cultures and Eastern medicine, would say that your biggest meals should be towards the beginning of the day or midday. And then you should really taper off and eat a lighter dinner so that you are not having to work too hard to digest it all right before bed or just a couple hours before bed, which can influence your sleep. And a lot of sleep studies and sleep science is showing that too. So again, toggle around with it and track what you're doing so you can be consistent and you can be objective. The next tip I'm going to say is to eat real food. And so I talked about that in the calorie section, but at the end of the day, when you eat actual food, it is super nutritious, it's going to be filling, and it's going to fuel your performance. It's not going to do crazy things with your energy level and spike your blood sugar and thus tank your blood sugar, because that roller coaster effect is a real thing with metabolizing sugar and simple carbs, things like that. So when you eat real food, you can avoid a lot of that. Most real food is going to have fiber in it, which slows digestion. It dampens that large blood sugar spike. So it's really hard to overeat real food. Sure, I can crush a huge ribeye steak, but if I'm just eating the steak, I'm probably not going to have a whole lot after eating a 10 or 12 ounce steak if I'm focused on it, if I'm mindful about it, right? Of course, we can sit down to a nice steak dinner and have some potatoes and some asparagus with butter on it. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is just focusing on eating till you're satiated, till you feel slightly full, until you feel good, and then just putting a cap in it. But that steak, it might be like 800 calories or so, if it's a pretty good sized ribeye, pretty fatty. But that's not that crazy, right? So if you think about eating 3 of those big old steaks for your 3 meals a day, which I don't think many people do unless they're carnivore, but let's not get too sidetracked there. That is 2,400 calories. So that's probably a pretty moderate amount of calories for someone my size, someone my age and activity level. And it's all real food. So before we get into the whole meat vegan thing, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is just a comparison or an example. But if we want to go into a plant version to keep it fair, it's going to be really hard for me to eat, more than 400 or 500 calories of black beans and sweet potatoes, especially if I don't put anything on it, right? Maybe a little bit of salt, which is good. But unless I'm dousing it with mayo or butter or some dressings or honey and all that, it's probably going to be hard for me to overeat those real whole foods. So by focusing on whole food, again, you're just going to be more full. You're going to get fiber. You're going to get healthy fat. You're going to get all those actual natural nutrients, and you're going to be less likely to overeat. Let's talk about an example that would be way easier to overeat. So we could take those sweet potatoes and we can cut them into fry shapes, and we can deep fry those those little bad boys. We can salt them. We can bring out some ketchup, some aioli. And I guarantee you, I know a lot of you all out there are just like me. I could sit down to probably a giant plate of sweet potato fries with those things. Probably even some salt, or just the fact that they're fried and crispy and delicious. And I could probably eat a whole plate on my own alongside my burger. And I'm also that guy that once the floodgates are open, I'm probably going to be able to, unless I tell myself not to, and be mindful about it, I could probably eat everyone else's leftover fries off their plate and the half burger that's sitting at, my lightweight bird stomach buddy across the table. So all to say, you can make it really you can make it really palatable really quickly by just modifying the food a little bit. So we're still just talking about sweet potato fries. We haven't even gotten to Doritos and things like that are literally chemically engineered so that it's hard for you to stop eating them. So it's not a secret. You can find a lot of sources on how a lot of these big food companies, and there's only like 3 or 4 of them in the world, but they're all putting a lot of money into not just advertising, but engineering the food so that once you have it, it's going to be really hard for you to stop. The whole once you pop, you can't stop. They are trying to get it to be addictive, and they are succeeding. I've crushed many a sleeve of Oreo as a kid. I've crushed many a bag of chips as an adult. It's a real thing. So if you think you're alone out there, you're not. We're in it together. Coming off of the discussion of real food, I'm going to get a little bit more specific, and I'm going to say another tip, which is to prioritize protein. I know I already kind of opened the gate on the meat/plant discussion, and I just want to clarify, I am a fan of meat, absolutely, but I'm also a fan of being omnivore and looking at what foods work for you. I have experimented with a largely plant-based diet, and I've experimented with a largely animal-based diet, and I don't feel great when I go too far on either extreme, although I do eat quite a bit of meat. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. You got to do what's right for you. However, when you prioritize protein, a lot of material is now showing that you're going to get full quicker and less likely to eat a ton. And maybe an example of that is if you think about when you're really hungry and ask yourself if you want a chicken breast. If you say no, then you're not hungry. But in that same moment, would you eat a baked potato with some salt on it? And maybe you would, or maybe you wouldn't. And maybe that's another just little self-assessment that if you're hungry or not. So why do I ask you to prioritize protein or suggest it? These are all invitations or suggestions. They're not prescriptions. Why I suggest prioritizing protein is because there's a lot of sources out there that are suggesting, or they have data indicating or studies indicating that our bodies may be eating until they essentially get enough protein, or they're sensing that they have enough protein to get the job done. So if I prioritize protein first, then I might have a lower likelihood of overeating. Also, by prioritizing protein first, if you just think about it mentally, and I can think about that personally, it's just going to be really hard for me to overeat a lot of the other tasty sides and all that if I have a substantial good serving of protein, right? So if I have 6 to 8 ounces of ground turkey or 2 drumsticks or some pulled pork, it's just not going to be that easy to eat a ton of other stuff. In addition, protein is an essential macronutrient. Carbs are technically not, although they're very useful for a lot of things. So I'm not anti-carb by any means. And I definitely have experimented with going low to basically no carbs or keto. But you need protein to build the tissues in your body. You need protein for repair. And if you want to sustain a healthier, more robust metabolism, in simple terms, the more muscle mass you have, which you need protein for, is going to be the more calories you burn just by simply existing. So that's going to be more passive calories you burn throughout the day. So if you imagine a really muscly man or woman with very little body fat at 150 pounds either way, then they will simply burn more calories by walking around and existing because their muscles necessitate it. It's another reason why it's going to be more beneficial for most people to do some strength training or resistance training to build and or maintain muscle if their goal is to actually burn fat and appear more lean. It might not be overall weight because we know muscle weighs more than fat, but if you want that leaner physique, certainly prioritize protein and do some resistance training. So now let's rewind back to our first segment where we were talking about calorie tracking. When you calorie track, you can literally learn how many calories and different macronutrients you're having. So if you go through an app, a program like MyFitnessPal, you're going to see how much protein you've taken in a day. And if you're not paying attention to it, if you're not prioritizing it, chances are you're going to be quite low, unless you make a concerted effort to have a higher source of protein in each meal, whether that's meat, Greek yogurt, legumes, things like that. You're just not going to get it. So that's going to be a really good takeaway to see how you can boost it, how you can add it in with different foods, potentially supplements. If you go for a high quality, organic, very few or no additives protein powder, then yeah, you should absolutely consider that as a food, whether you go with a whey or you go with a plant-based protein. Go nuts, experiment with it. But if you do 1 or 2 of those a day, so that's going to be on average 20 to 25 grams of protein per serving of any type of protein powder or any type of decent protein powder, then that's definitely going to help you out, right? So you're going to have instantly 20 more grams. If you do 2 of them a day, then yeah, 40. That's a pretty good boost to your protein that you may be under eating. And most sources out there will suggest that you have approximately 1 gram of protein per body weight or lean mass. So another way of putting that is your target body weight. So if I'm a pretty skinny 150 pound guy like I used to be, and I want to gain some muscle mass, then I should get at least 150, maybe 160 or more grams of protein. If I'm a 200 pound guy and I could stand to lose a few pounds, then maybe 180 would be sufficient. And the last thing I'll say about protein is that it does have per gram fewer calories than fat. It has per gram in literature the same amount as carbs, but more sources and industry leaders are indicating that protein has a metabolic cost. So what that means is that for every gram of protein you eat, your body has to work a decent amount to process that. So, if it's 4 calories per gram, well, maybe you're only absorbing like 3. And that's an example I've heard from a couple nutritionists or dietitians. So don't quote me on that, but if you look for the information, a lot of reputable sources are suggesting that. So some are even saying, hey, if you're having lean protein, it may be quote unquote a free calorie. So a good way to eat more food without getting the likelihood or as high a likelihood as metabolizing the excess as fat. The next tip would be to consider experimenting with a high carb or low carb diet. So high carb, lower fat, or high fat, lower carb, right? To do low carb, low fat is going to be a crash diet. It'll work to get you into bikini or mankini shape, but guarantee you when you go on vacation, it's going to prime your body to store most of those resort carbs, those resort treats and drinks as fat, which is just going to yo-yo you back, which is what the diet industry counts on. So don't slash your calories. Please don't go extreme. Nice and slow. You have your whole life to do this whole nutrition thing. Take it from me. I've definitely tried that too. But just to get into it without going overboard, because there's a lot of sources that'll help you, online, podcasts, YouTube, a lot of influencers and athletes that lean one way or the other. But if I want to think objectively, but look at anecdotes to see if it's possible, I think that the best example is bodybuilding. Because for all intents and purposes, most of us get into fitness for a largely aesthetic reason at its base, right? Maybe it comes out of a little self-confidence or just wanting to feel better in our bodies, which is great. And then if we're exercising for a bodybuilding purpose, then we're building muscle, we're looking lean, and certainly there's dysfunctional ways to lift weights and there's functional ways to lift weights. But really what I'm trying to say is that bodybuilding culture shows us and proves to us that low carb, high fat, moderate to high protein works amazingly. There are IFBB pros, there's every type of champion, medaling, physique competitor or bodybuilder that has done low carb and excelled. And there's absolutely the same for people that have done high carb, low fat. So the more traditional quote unquote bro diet. You know, you're thinking about the tubs of chicken breast or tuna with rice and some broccoli, very low fat. And that's definitely been extremely successful for a lot of people. So why I bring that up for the general population is that those are both methods that prove that either road is possible. Really what it comes down to is perhaps personal preference and perhaps your own biology. And you really won't know that until you experiment with it. There are some genetic tests that would suggest that maybe you're a better fat metabolizer or a better carb metabolizer and how you should eat. Sure, check it out. But really, what's going to be most accurate is you trying it maybe for a few weeks and trying the other one for a few weeks and just seeing how you feel. One's just going to be way more agreeing to your body, and one's going to be way more pleasant and more enjoyable for you to do. Some people love to eat fattier meats, fattier cuts, and don't really care for carbs once they cut them out. And other people would be completely happy to have the lean stuff if they can have their pasta, if they can have their potatoes and their rice. So that's going to come down to personal preference. But again, give yourself a chance and don't go too extreme. Or again, either way, you're probably going to hate it and you're going to think nothing's working. Especially for low carb, there is an adaptation period if you go super low. So toggle it down over time. Just be mindful of that. Next order of business, we got to talk about eating for your activity level. So we are not all the same. We do not all live the same lives. We do not all carry around the same amount of body mass. We don't all walk the same amount of distance to work from our cars or through our office buildings, or maybe we're on our feet. Maybe we're a delivery driver. I certainly had a ton more activity when I was in K-9 than when I was an average patrol officer. And you already know that I had a ton more activity, daily activity and steps and all that when I was an average patrol officer than when I became a sergeant. Because sergeants love hanging out at their desk, right? They got all that stuff to do, or they don't. Y'all have those sergeants either way. But the point is, you got to consider what your output is to consider what your input is. So if you are having a busy week and you're at the desk and you're catching up on admin stuff, or you're just not, maybe you're just in your car a lot and you're not actually using the stairs a lot, you're not walking around a ton, whatever the week looks like, then you don't need to eat like you did on the weekend when you got to go to an hour of CrossFit or Pilates or whatever your thing is, right? So consider for your activity level. Be mindful that when we get busy, some of us are stress eaters. So when you do get that bag of trail mix or that late night drive-through Mexican food sign just shining down on you like a beacon from heaven. Be mindful of that. Try not to fall into the giant pit of despair that it could be at that troubling hour. Just know where you're at and try to fuel your performance. So if you are getting into a new routine, then don't at the same time, as often happens, work out a ton and then slash your calories or cut back considerably. Maybe eat similar to how you have been eating, emphasize protein a little bit, and just see how you feel, right? Too often with New Year's around the corner, a lot of people get this invigoration of motivation, and it's awesome. It's good, right? It's good to self-check. It's good to get motivated again and set some new goals. But we don't want to double down. We don't want to go too hard in the paint right at the get-go. So too often people sign up for a new membership at whatever fitness thing, and they go 2-a-days or they go every day a week for like an hour, and then they're cutting their calories or they're fasting or whatever. No, let's toggle one thing at a time, right? So I like what Jade Teta, he's a doctor and super fit dude, but he came up with this: eat more, move more. And I might be messing it up, but the point is, eat more when you're moving more and eat less when you're moving less, rather than the contrary, which is what a lot of us do when we get really motivated. So just be mindful of that. And with that, I'll say and wrap it up with commit to movement and rest. So by just making that part of your daily practice, no matter what it is, you're doing something. It's what me and my wife call BTN, better than nothing workouts. I've gotten the habit many years ago when I was brewing my coffee just to foam roll, and that would quickly become doing some band work. And this is not like huff and puff. This is like literally hook a giant rubber band around your feet and just do some rows, right? Just feel it. Feel your scapula and your back contract. Just pulling your elbows back. Just doing some nice nasal breathing as that coffee is dripping. Maybe doing some slow push-ups, right? And stretching out, doing a Spider-Man stretch. Look that up. It's a good one. But you can kind of get the self-assessment of how your body is, right? Are you sore? Are you achy? That might be a good litmus test for how hard you went in the gym the other day, and what you need to be mindful of. It might be a good self-assessment for how you feel today. So maybe the plan was to blast your legs, but if your knees feeling a little wonky as you do some body weight squats waiting for your coffee, then maybe you just kind of adjust it, or maybe you just didn't sleep very well and you got the wonky knee. Well, that might be a good day to work on mobility, or just do some steady state cardio. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm totally fine just doing some incline at the gym, or just scrapping that and just going on a long walk with my dog after work. So be flexible. Just commit to movement. Make it part of your daily practice, no matter what it is, and you're going to feel good, right? Because you did something. And most people out there, they're whining about not having time. They're doing nothing. It doesn't take much to do something. It actually doesn't take anything, right? We have all these little bits of time throughout our day, whether it's right before bed, right as we rise. You just should commit. It's a principle that I heard on a podcast one time called habit stacking, right? So the habit stacked is that when I'm waiting for my coffee, I don't just sit on the couch and basically fetal position with my phone scrolling. I'm going to stretch out. I'm going to do some body weight squats on the kitchen counter, just to kind of feel my joints and loosen up, get some blood flow, drink my pint or 20 ounces of water, before I have my coffee. These are just things that I decided were things I wanted to make priorities, and so I committed to them. And now it's very much second nature. I don't think about it. It's not hard. It's just part of it. So, all right, we're coming up on 44 minutes. So thank you for listening. I hope this is helpful. It's just I say down and dirty, but it did take amount of time, but we did cover a lot of information, right? So I want to say each of these categories, you can find a host of information. So my point isn't to belabor or just be redundant on any of this information. there are countless hours of YouTube and podcasts, or whether it's reading, actual print or reading articles on just calories alone. That's not my point, right? You can find all that, but hopefully this breakdown covers on a light note all these different things that you may consider as you move forward in your life and you find the right balance and practice for your lifestyle, because that's what it is. It's your life. These are all just things that I've picked up through the years, things that I've tried, things that I've failed upon. And so I just want to put it out there. So hopefully my learnings don't become, your failed efforts. Hopefully you can take this and put it with whatever strategy you want to try and whatever you're researching on the side, and try to find a more balanced approach so that you can truly succeed in the long term. I will end this episode by endorsing a couple dudes that are close to me. They're very close friends, but I also trust in what they're doing. So I will say, with no kickback and no sponsorship, if you're looking for a home in the Pacific Northwest, specifically the greater Seattle area, King County, like Seattle area, the east side, David Hogan of David Hogan Homes. He's one of my best friends. You're not going to find a guy with a greater integrity and ethic to get you where you need to go in this seemingly impossible real estate market. It was the market itself, and now it's the interest rate, so that's super fun. But then on the south side, if you're looking more like South King County, Pierce County, and around there, and around the peninsula, Trevor Walcott with Gene Seavers Real Estate down in Gig Harbor. He's one of my best buddies, actually through work. He was a police officer alongside me for 10 years of my 10 plus years, because I'm an old man next to him. But he's one of the dudes that, did the job exactly as anyone should do it. And as exactly as you'd want someone responding to your family. So I'm super proud of him in joining in this new endeavor. He's retired from police work and he's starting this new chapter in life. He's doing very well. So I just want to do a little shout out for him, because as much as I do talk about surviving this career and navigating the low morale and culture, I do truly support all my brothers and sisters that put in their time and serve their community graciously and with conviction, and decided that their time was good and it was time for a new chapter. And I think that law enforcement is an absolutely amazing path that you can do for that. As much as I do want to focus on how to navigate it, I don't think it's fair to ignore how many life skills, how much conflict resolution, how much relationship building, how much problem solving, just dynamic thinking that you get in this career that can absolutely lend itself to a host of other things. So I will end it with that. That's my plug to two of my buddies, but truly very impressive professionals if you're looking for someone to help you in real estate in the area that I live in. So take care, be safe, stay hungry, and stay humble.